Thank you for taking the time today. My name's Eric Alexander. I'm Executive Director of the Brigham Education Institute, and it's really a pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague and partner in the BEI, Narath Carlile, who's our really lead on all things education, science, and technology, and has been for many years now. And there are many innovations that we have moving forward. The background to all of this is that we feel like we have so much technology at times that is out there, that is at times purchased for our use, and it's hard to sometimes raise awareness or remember all the different things we have. And sometimes there's a little bit of an activation energy to start getting facile and using these tools. And so this is one of those sessions to help get over that activation energy. We also do monitor the chat box, and so feel free to contribute in that fashion as well. With that, Narath, I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Caitlin, I'm going to ask you to be our chat moderator. It's a little hard to watch both the chat and the session today, but thanks so much. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the talk. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Thanks so much, everyone. So this is the beginning of an educational innovation series. We've got 2 already on the books, and then I'll show you a few more that we've got planned. So we'd love your input around it. Today is really the beginning of 2 sessions on homegrown things, and really not to say that we have the ultimate tool. We're just saying that there's an interesting tool that I think all medical learners and educators should at least know about, and we're going to talk about some of the lessons we've learned and some of the challenges of it. I'm hoping that those from a broader audience who may not be able to access the tools directly will see that there's ways that they can use these for their own organization, but there's some concepts and ways of thinking about this complexity in medicine that I'd like us all to sort of be thinking about and collaborating on. So we're going to start with Suvi. Suvi is an outstanding medical student. She's a really hard worker. She did well in learning medical pathophysiology and on her rotations across different hospitals. She's now excited and she's nervous to join the rigorous training program here at the Brigham. Everyone says she's ready, but she's not feeling totally ready and she's feeling a little nervous. And the subtext is like, has she been well prepared by this Ivy League and really expensive medical education system? So we join her again 3 months later, and she's had some really busy rotations in inpatient and critical care and across clinics. So how are most interns feeling at this point? Well, there's so much more than medical pathophysiology to know, and so much more than like just how to work well with others or the theoretical concepts of quality improvement. How do you get things done in a really complex system that's changing so frequently? So the light that she's got there is all the studying she was doing in medical school, right, that she felt was what she really needed to master. And the darkness around is this massive complex system that she's supposed to interact well in order to practice medicine well. In addition to the complexity of the medical record and ordering labs, there's schedule complexities. How do I do procedures here? And all the conferences she's supposed to be going to. And then there's a ton of different places that the information lives. Email, Vault, Teams, the organizational website, department website. She got a bunch of papers at orientation and she's lost those. Okay. So the practice of medicine is really complex and it's probably always going to be so, right? But I think, can we as medical educators have done better to prepare this really bright, capable, and adaptable learner? And then Dr. Rain is a really wonderful attending physician, and he prepares really well for being a teaching attending on service. He knows that there are a lot of common problems that residents need support to understand and to manage well. And he also knows that on each rotation, the best learning is going to be based on their specific patient challenges, and also that they've had lots of other materials and attendings teaching them, and they've got lots of courses and lectures that they go to. How could he understand what their current experience is so that he could better adapt his material to it, or better yet, reinforce and improve the materials that they've had so that they are more adapted to that particular learner in that particular context? Imagine if this could happen, right? What kind of learning health system would that create? So I'm hoping we get some treasure today, and this is going to be treasure that we discover together, and that this is really going to be about learning what's been tried, discussing ways to help create a new vision for our clinical learners and teachers in these complex environments. So this guiding vision that I'm trying to inspire you with is that for all our clinical learners, that they come into the system feeling well prepared at each step of their journey, that they've received effective and compelling training in each of the specific systems that they'll need to work in, not just in a general system, so that they can, on day one, and day 20 and day 300 and day 6,000 continue to take really great care of our patients, that they can be a good colleague and that they can learn and develop into the best physician they can be. We know things are going to change, including knowledge and practice, but we now feel confident in this future vision that each one of our residents and learners and ourselves can quickly and systematically get up to speed before any new rotation, that they've got a great on-call resource that's up to date. And not only that, this hidden rainbow is that now each of the clinical learners on this journey feels empowered to participate in improving the knowledge that makes all of the practice of medicine better for us. So that's the vision. In the language of more educational pedagogy, I want to translate these into some learning objectives. So after this session, I've succeeded if you're then able to describe the systems of knowledge that are required in the practice of medicine within academic medical centers, based not just on what we think, what some impressive organizations think, but also on seeing what's actually used today. I want you to be able to access and use this open source learning system that's available today, if you have an account within the Brigham, that could help our learners and educators access materials across each of these specific subsystems. And then I want you to be able to be empowered to contribute to refine and improve this collaborative knowledge system, which is as yet sort of underutilized. And we'll talk a little bit about how the research can tell us sort of what phase we are in helping our learners to really participate and be empowered in creating this highest standard of practice of medicine within our institution. As Eric alluded to, we've got some future sessions. The session 2 is going to be really about departments and residency programs that sparkle. And these are lessons learned from these highly effective programs that we've had the ability to participate in with this Sparkle app, which you'll see a little bit later. We did a previous session here, a quick short 15-minute session about why we built this. And we'll be diving into more deeply how these highly effective residency programs use the system and what it helps them to do. There's some higher level topics that I'd like to do, which is what else is out there, the cutting edge of educational innovation, including some things in XR and AR. I think it's really important to talk about what about AI? What should clinical educators know about AI? It's a continuation of a series that we had done a year ago. And then we're building the Innovative Clinical Educators Toolkit. What are your colleagues using that you should also consider? If you've seen a survey come out from the Brigham, please from the Brigham Educational Institute about this, please just fill it out. We're getting a lot of amazing data, not just on the tools that we know about in the Educational Institute, but that are being used by clinicians and that want to be used by clinicians. In the spirit of disclosures, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that I developed Brigapedia when I was a medical resident, along with a team of others. The chief residents, Kyle Morawski, Stephen, Caitlin's being instrumental now, Tom Engstrom for design, and then especially David Rubens, who as chief resident really moved it forward. I continue to serve as the editor-in-chief. The goal here is not to present the Brigapedia as the be-all and end-all, but as a project that can help teach us some lessons and has some interesting data. I'm also the clinical health informatics lead here at the Brigham and lead the Sparkle project for the BI, along with Caitlin, who's really helping us across other departments to adopt it. So I will keep that in mind as I present those to you, but we're going to look at other apps from other institutions as well. All right. The big focus here is how do we best prepare our residents and ourselves to practice medicine within these systems? And I think many medical schools are thinking deeply about this. They want their medical students to arrive and ready to be confident residents who are practicing medicine well. I think the details around, it's the practice of medicine within an academic medical center. And in reality, what that really is the practice of medicine within and across many clinical environments within one or more complex organizations. So let me just say that again so that you can feel a little bit about how you might think about prioritizing what we're teaching these residents to be. So this is the practice of medicine within and across many clinical environments within one or more complex organizations. As I thought about this and, as I'd entered, I thought that the biggest amount of material I had to master was the knowledge of medicine. But once you start practicing and you come to the residency, your experience is radically different, right? So what is the common experience of residents? You have 2-week rotations. So you move from one department to another department every 2 weeks. These can be very different parts of the hospital, even when you're in, say, just a single specialty like medicine. Not only that, but it can be across different hospitals. So we practice in the medicine residency at 3 different hospitals: the main hospital at the Brigham, the Faulkner Community Hospital, and the VA, right? All of those have different systems of practice. And we work in clinics, right? So not just in your primary care clinic, which might be associated with another institution. For example, at Codman Square, you're working inside the BMC system. When you do urgent care, you're then expected to go and practice inside the Gen Center, which is the largest academic center inside the main hospital in a very complex environment. So that's a little bit of a sense of like this complexity that we're asking these residents to just take on and then to move through for a number of years. So I know that people are thinking about this at a level. I know Eric is thinking about this as he's thinking about undergraduate education and these transitions, and the ACGME is thinking about it. So they've defined not just medical knowledge as one of the core competencies, but a range of them. So I just thought we'd look together at the core competencies of medicine. Patient care and procedural skills, medical knowledge, right? So I think these are the things that everyone instantly thinks about. Also practice-based learning and improvement. Also interpersonal skills, communication and skills, professionalism, and systems-based practice. This thing which I think is this elephant in the room. Let's dive into practice-based learning and improvement and systems-based practice so we can understand what exactly they meant by that. For practice-based learning and improvement, they mean being able to investigate and evaluate patient care, being able to appraise and assimilate scientific data, and being able to apply continuous improvement to the practice of medicine. You can see how there's sort of a theoretical basis that it would be useful to teach all medical students how to approach this. But you can also understand that if we're expecting them to demonstrate this and to succeed at it, especially in investigating and evaluating patient care and applying continuous improvement, it's going to be heavily dependent on the culture of the system that they're moving into in terms of how they value quality improvement, continuous improvement, and evaluation of the care they're providing. Systems-based practice. So what are the domains, the subdomains here? Well, working effectively in various healthcare delivery settings and systems relevant to their clinical specialty. This is the big one, right? So if I say, hey, I want to get you really, really well prepared to have a great year as an intern, and I'm going to take all the time that's necessary to make sure you're confident and ready to do well in each of the locations I'm going to place you. How long would we need to make that happen, right? And how would we even gather that data? For residents, that's going to mean 10 to 12 different clinical settings with a different clinical focus. They also need to know how to coordinate patient care within the healthcare system relevant to their clinical specialty. And this can change very quickly. There are already dedicated staff members, the wonderful care coordinators within the system, that it takes years to know how best to work with them. And then with things like COVID, the way that your patients are going to be cared for in the community that you're trying to be responsible for as well can radically change quickly. You need to be able to incorporate considerations of cost awareness and risk-benefit analysis in patient care. You need to be able to advocate for quality patient care and optimal patient care systems, to work in interprofessional teams and enhance patient safety and improve patient care quality. And you need to participate in identifying system errors and implementing potential system solutions. All of a sudden, 3 or 4 years seems a very short time, given the amount that we're hoping people become competent in. Okay, it's a big challenge, right? But we're used to taking on some of those, and clearly it's happening today. So how is it happening today? What are the existing solutions? Well, I think the core one, and the one that's most widespread and the most widely used, and arguably the most effective, is the teaching team. The idea that the person's not joining as the intern or the junior doctor, but they're joining to take care of the patients as a team, right? And so what does that team consist of? Well, the newest learners of the team are supervised by a resident. And this is somebody who's got deep, hard-won experience of how to do things in the context and rotation that you're working in, and has good medical knowledge, as they've been seen and supervised for the year or two before. They sit side by side, solving problems with the intern and the medical student, helping and guiding them in the best possible scenarios for learning, right? An immediate problem in front of you. How do I solve this now? Hopefully with sort of the ability to give them the opportunity to decide what they want to do first, with then redirection. This is a core of medical education as it stands today. The attending is also there to play a role, also supposed to be an expert in the practice of medicine and also in knowledge of medicine, especially at a high level. Critical, as every physician, especially every resident and intern knows, are the nurses, are core teachers for us, helping us to avoid errors and problems and giving us critical information about how things are going. And then these amazing pharmacists who are helping us manage this tremendous body of knowledge and making sure that we're doing the things where there are easy errors to make, which is in making sure the appropriate dosages and handling interactions. And, arguably the most important, of course, is the patient, who's there to be the expert in their values and the longitudinal care. And ideally, they'll have a strong caregiver and advocate. So that's, I think, why medicine's not collapsing and you're not having everybody sort of throw up their arms, because we've got this highly effective, adaptable system that's localized. But I think just going through it, you can see how this is going to be very dependent on the resident, right? So the intern and the medical student's experience is going to be closely focused on that experience. And we know that that's not always the same. Can we do better to help support this? The other thing that's out there is, of course, orientation and handbooks and Word documents, right? Often 20, 30, 40 more pages, handed in sheets, collected in binders, and then sometimes scanning on your phone to try to do this. And we see this again and again. And as residency programs and others have entered digital age, what we're seeing is most of the time they're writing giant Word documents or PDF documents and then handing them to the residents in this sort of digital version, but they're really hard to scan on your phone as you're trying to get there. It's hard to read and remember the material. So there might be better, more appropriate modalities for this. And then, of course, there are organizational and department websites and these content management systems, and they can be incredibly valuable. They often serve the multiple audiences, and then they tend to use this command and control structure because they don't want a free-for-all in there, right? How would you maintain quality? How do you make sure that you're not saying inappropriate things? Which unfortunately means that they often either are serving too general an audience, and so it's not an effective place for you to go to say, like, how do I do something new here? And then the other big challenge is that because of the command and control structure, making changes on them can be a slow process, which quickly leads to things becoming old. And so suddenly it becomes easier for you to find old things than the relevant and current things. And we see that happen again and again. It's best when they're newest, and then they have a very short lifespan of when they remain relevant. But they remain a very important repository for things that are that require this command and control and structure. But I think there are other ways that we might support it, and we'll talk about some examples there. So those, I think are the traditional and the obvious solutions that almost everywhere has. But of course, there's an app for this too, right? So at the Brigham, there's a combination. It's Sparkle, which hopefully you remember is an acronym for the single point for all resources of clinical knowledge, learning, and education, which is the handheld app that the residents carry around that connects them to all the resources within the Brigham in this very lightweight, sort of card-based way. There's a curated collection for them specific to their department and their role. And then they're able to curate these by favoriting and or unfavoriting these. And then they'll get updates on the things that they're interested in. A key card that I'm going to point you to is the Brigapedia one, which is the link to sort of how to understand how do I get things done in the specific rotations. The other things are related to specific conferences, and we'll see a few other resources out there. So clicking on Brigapedia for the resident, what do I see? And you see sort of this mobile-friendly view, which will also view on your desktop, and you see a series of updates. This is what the chief residents think and have learned from questions from residents are the most important quick links that they need. There's a large amount of medical education, and this is the one that I think that for medical educators, I would love every department to have easy access to something like this. What are the learners seeing, and what are the tremendous resources that they have access to? How could we see those and maybe even contribute to improving them as we seek to be great teaching attendings on our service? So not only can we see all the conferences and recordings, but other faculty materials and the materials that the residents are developing themselves in their primers, which are powerful documents that I remember very well for having a sense of self-confidence when you first start your rotation and then continuing to evolve as the knowledge evolves. There are, of course, also a lot of other logistic things and things to deal with wellness and well-being, as well as fellowship programs and other things. The MGH has their own custom-built app as well, the Whitebook, and it has many of the same resources that we see in ours. So logistical task, calendaring information, conference information, and then a tremendous resource and wealth of inpatient clinical information, which they've done an amazing job at integrating and synthesizing the information, and then adapting it to how do I do this in the local institution. Since the Brigham and the Mass General are very similar, and we certainly share the same medical record and many of the same sort of lab services, we utilize this as well within the Brigham, and it's a widely used resource for the residents in addition to the other clinical resources. So let's talk briefly just about Brigapedia, and I want to tell you a little bit about the infrastructure and then why we chose this, and then I wanted to teach you some of those key features that I'm hoping will empower you in the learning objectives we discussed earlier. So the Brigapedia is a wiki, different than sort of like the organizational department websites, which are often these content management systems. And wiki comes from the delightful Hawaiian phrase, wiki, which means quick. And I think that it was said to be quick because it was quick to edit and update, and it was quick to develop a shared body of knowledge. And these have been around since the early 90s. You might have used a wiki yourself in read-only mode, and of course the best known one is Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is based on the MediaWiki engine, which is open sourced, and it's the same engine that we use. And we'll talk about why we chose that. Wikipedia, of course, is not just the source of the engine, but it's also one of the most widely used medical resources worldwide. And this is from July 2019, and Wikipedia is one of the top 3 for medical information. And there's a huge amount of articles that are continuing to grow. There are now by 2017, there were 30,000 medical articles on it. And organizations like UCSF have a specific rotation where medical students participate in improving the medical pages on it, which I think is wonderful. Not only is it used by lay people, but it also has a tremendous amount of usage, sometimes called hidden, by medical students, residents, and physicians. I remember being explicitly told not to quote Wikipedia as a reference, but there was a study in 2015 here at Harvard Medical School surveying the students, and up to 97% of the students referenced Wikipedia at some point. It was in their top 3 resources. So they used UpToDate first, then they used PubMed, and then they used Wikipedia. Wikipedia was rated much more highly for readability, but it was known to be less trustworthy. In the UK, 70% of the junior doctors, the equivalent of the interns and residents, used it at least weekly, and they primarily used it just for background reading. So it's used there. There's a lot of concerns around content validity and readability. There are previous studies that sort of assessed it for that, and I think it remains an ongoing concern. But we'll talk a little bit about why their content seems to be improving and why we've seen their content become at least comparable to the Encyclopedia Britannica and other resources, and how we might see with collaborative world effort the improvement of both its validity as well as its readability across the world. So we were struggling in our residency about how to help residents adapt to all these complex environments, and then how to collate and curate educational materials, how to let people know about conferences and schedules. We had a content management system which had been glutted with old materials, and so I could find more easily the antibiogram from 5 years ago than the current one. So we started to consider other alternatives. We looked around at what other residencies were doing and looked at the Mass General, where they were starting to use a blog-based system where it would sort of post updates to people by email, and they could request to make changes, I guess, which evolved into the handbook. And then we looked at the Beth Israel Deaconess, where they actually had done a research project on the adoption of a wiki within their residency program. And a good friend and colleague, Brad Crotty, and some colleagues wrote this article about it. In this article, they showed that a wiki is feasible and a useful tool for improving information retrieval for house officers. Up to 90% of the house staff felt it improved their ability to complete tasks, and it improved their experience, their efficiency, and their education. So there are a lot of wiki tools out there. Why did we choose MediaWiki? Now within Teams, for example, you're going to on the Teams room, and there's a wiki section there. The wiki is very nice because it allows quick editing, quick sharing, but it lacks a few features that MediaWiki has, and we'll talk about what those are. One of these features is that it's very robust, right? So Wikipedia is based on it, so it scales very easily. And then they've used a lot of creative constraints to limit the amount of advanced technology inside it. So it uses technologies that are more easy to support, don't require massively advanced hardware, and have a community of people who we could reach out to if we needed support. So Stephen Lawrence has been a system admin for a number of years and has helped us to maintain this on initially what was a research VM, so not a very powerful machine, but still supported. And I'll show you some of the stats of what we've done. It's also pretty flexible, and that's a really big feature, I think, of wikis in general. But MediaWiki in particular uses a very simple text-based format that lets you make sure that the content you'll always have access to. It's not going to be hidden in some proprietary format. If anyone's ever seen the original source for like Word documents, they're pretty complex. These are much more simple and straightforward, and they have very flexible usage there, and then a very flexible way to create hierarchy. And importantly for us was that it was open to our community. So it's not open to the world. It's behind a Brigham login, so you need to have access to that. But then we wanted sort of every page to be editable. You know, we thought that if you're a professional within the institution and you notice that something is out of date, the time we think is you're most likely to change it is when you've referenced it, it's out of date, you figured out how to do it, and now you can update it quickly, right? Within a minute or two. We thought that could contribute to a very vibrant, updated, up to the moment resource, which would be much more useful. But it's also important content. We don't want people to be making mistakes or going down or making inappropriate edits. And so it needs strong editorial controls, which Wikipedia has demonstrated time and time again. You're also able, of course, to edit any page on Wikipedia. And if you've ever done so, you'll notice that within a minute or two, you've had some editorial feedback on it. And so that's built into the system. And I'll show you how you're able to do that for your own content if you're going to post some inside our Brigapedia wiki. But I think one of the biggest things, especially for the Brigham, was that it really aligns with the culture of medicine that I think we're aiming to promote. You know, residents and physicians and healthcare providers in general are being given a tremendous professional responsibility to care deeply for patients. We think that can extend, that level of trust and caring for patients should extend to the ability for them to co-curate knowledge and educational resources that make this better. And that's strongly aligned with the Brigham, where we didn't need people to make a comment back. They could go and update something, right? And then editors would be able to review it and say, that was great. Thanks so much for participating. So a core part of professionalism I'm hoping for now in the future is going to be that medical professionals contribute to knowledge and system knowledge as they're going through every system they work in. And this is Brigapedia is a platform that they can use to do that. So let's just talk a little bit about what we've learned from it so far, because I think it's really fun because there's a bunch of data that is hard to get in other systems, but that we can see from within our system, which has now been in play with good data gathering since 2016. First, we can learn about that question in the beginning. What are the systems of knowledge that residents need to know about to do well? And we can see this from the pages and how the pages have changed over time. I went through briefly what you see in the mobile view and the desktop view. You see more of this. So a few critical features here are where are my conferences? What are they doing? Importantly, what's the topic and what's for lunch? There are core updates related to which Zoom rooms I'm supposed to go in, and then expectations related to the residency, and different policies and schedules. Schedule and rotation information is a core need. Yes, these are all available on the main giant website for the hospital, but having the critical ones that we're expecting residents to understand, it's really important. We looked in a little bit of detail at the medical education section, where I think there are a lot of really interesting things where I think medical educators could contribute to. But then there are also a lot of things related to the pandemic, IT resources, where do I go in fellowship, in addition to clinical management guidelines. And then a sense of participating in a living system, right? So updates in a system that is not going to inundate my email. It turns out that this is useful not only for the medicine residency, but is useful across other departments. So I'm just going to show you sort of the evolution. From the medicine residency, we started using it in the Gen Center, which is the large primary care academic center in the Brigham, the largest primary care center across the Brigham system for now. A very complex environment. As I said, every resident is expected to come in there and rotate through, and we try to make sure these resources are widely available. One of the best successes here was the massive reduction in the emails that the medical director got after we were able to get this well in place. And then the other one, as a relief for me as a primary care attending when I was practicing there, was that all of a sudden I could relax in my email. The medical director would send out something about new staff or new ways of doing something. And instead of me having to save and curate that somewhere myself, which was, reinventing the wheel for each of the attendings that was there, they would just send the Brigapedia link as well. And then I could instantly relax, know that it was just an FYI and delete it. But then I could just go to the Brigapedia and see the latest information there. The hospitalists are ever innovative, and so they adopted it quickly and used it within their to keep all of their departmental information. This is tied closely to their highly active SharePoint as well, so it's one thing where it doesn't replace it. There are utilities for both of those that they explored. Infectious disease was phenomenal. Jen Johnson took this on within 2 weeks, learned how to use the wiki system. We gave her a template for how they might consider it, and then within 2 weeks, had been able to digitize completely their fellowship orientation program, and now has this tremendous resource, which is available not just to the infectious disease doctors, but to the residents across the medicine divisions and others. And the two most recent ones are the surgery residency, who've now developed a beautiful sort of homepage detailing all the resources in their complex services with their very specific surgical services. And then for Harvard medical students, they used to have a giant document, which was for their clinical experience. And now it's been transformed into a wiki document that's both available easily on their phones as they're going there, as well as quickly scanning to it and searching for it. So those are some of the advantages that we saw launch across it. And since we made Brigapedia sort of this open source one, we were able to move it easily from across divisions, which is a little bit harder with the bespoke apps such as the MGH White book. Are there any new lessons that we can learn? Well, we can learn about how content needs change over time, because as I'll show you later, the wiki keeps track of all of the versions. So I can easily see how pages have changed across years to understand if there are any relevant changes. Seeing COVID emerge, of course, was one of the easiest things to spot. I'm going to show you in detail a little bit how you do that yourself. It's a widely used resource. We've got like over 23,000 edits within it. And we can see that on average, most pages are edited 5 times. We can also easily see which are the pages that have the most revisions. So across our institution, we can see what gets updated the most. And we see that scheduling is one of the things that's most complex and changes the most. But then we also see that main content pages change, and then a few of the other rotation-specific areas change as well. Is there any data about is it used and who's using it? It's been used over 1.8 million times since we launched it in 2016. You can see that most people use it for quick references, so about a minute on time, looking up something, getting the information, then leaving. We see utilization is fairly constant. The only variability you see is on Saturdays and Sundays. And then we can see that it's used at every hour of the day. There's no block there that doesn't have color, right? So it means at any time of the day, somebody's using it, but clearly it's used most widely during the day and particularly in the morning time. It's actually used mostly on desktops, but there's a large percentage that also use it on mobile. And this is the one where using a responsive sort of platform that can show it on mobile and on a desktop view is really important. And then there's some unique views. This one's very hard to see, but it's just showing you what are the flows into and then out of the medicine residency homepage. And this lets you understand like where are people coming from and where are they going to in a very unique way. And so we're using a variety of sort of just these simple analytics to get to that information. If we were doing this with educational resources or primers, we could get a lot of information about where we think the most challenging areas are that people return to. So what are the features that I think you should know about? Since if you're inside the Brigham, you have access to this. You just need to use your original partner's login, so the 5-digit code, and then you should have access to see those areas. Well, I think for this community, I want them to really know that it's, the things that I would like you to empower about is about collaborative knowledge sharing, but curated, right? So I'm going to show you version control and editing, how to edit, and then how to maintain updates, so to easily see changes that are happening. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the literature around wiki and hypertexts, so we can see about future directions and future research opportunities. So let's say you're an attending, you've been working with a research group on procalcitonin and this new measure that they're trying and what its benefits and what its limitations are, and you're about to start and you're going to go and update the ICU primer for the residents. So we're going to go ahead and click on the edit button, which everyone has when they're logged in. You are then going to be put into this editing view, and what you see on the side is wiki text, which is what I prefer to do, but everybody has access to this visual editor. So you just select visual editing. It's the default for most new users. And then you just go in and using the what you see is what you get tool, I've gone in and put in a new area under the miscellaneous section on procalcitonin. I've then created a link because I'm going to make this a hypertext document, which I think has a lot of benefits for learners. We'll talk a little bit about the research on that. And by clicking on that link, it'll then say, look inside the wiki to say, is there an existing link for me? So you can easily create these interlinked ones, which are helpful ways to connect knowledge, but be able to describe things that are at a nice high level for sophisticated users. In this case, there's not a page. And so that link there is red. And all I need to do is click on it, and then a default page is created, and then I can save my page. When I come to click on that link in the document, it will then tell me that there's no page for this, but I can easily create that page. So this is how wikis, and this wiki in particular, lets you create what can be really hard in, say, a Word document or a Google Doc, which is how to create a nice hierarchical structure that matches to the domain knowledge that you'd like to impart to the user. And we'll talk about some of the research sections that show that this can be very valuable. After you've created it and you're saving it, you have the ability to add a quick comment about it, to review your changes, to see the differences in the document, and then to save it. And then everyone who's interested or is watching that page, you'll see will get an update. What if I make a mistake? What if I'm not the expert? What if somebody's going to edit it? How do they do that? And they do this by just going into the history that you've seen. Every page has a history. Everyone can see it. And then you can see all the edits that have changed in it. You can select 2 different edits, and then you'll see a difference to view for that. So it's quick to see what's there. And I want to point out that on this line, for everyone, there's an undo link. If the edits there were not appropriate, you quickly click the undo link, and it restores the previous version. That's how this robust editing happens on Wikipedia, and it's how editing can happen within it while you allow control to be distributed to the people who are doing the work. It's really important that we don't get inundated. And do I now have to go there and scroll hundreds of web pages? No, you don't. There's a beautiful system built into it that allows you to watch pages. If you edit any page, you're automatically added to that as a watch list. So you'll know if people modify the things that you've changed or if they change this page. But you can go in and add any page to your watch list, and you'll now get updates for that. In your watch list, you can go through and see all of the places where you've made changes and what changes have happened since then. If you make a change or somebody else makes a change, you will get an email notification for every page that you're watching that will give you a link to show you exactly what's changed. During COVID, we were inundated with huge amounts of information of practice-changing things, right? Which every physician then had to read, try to understand, and then keep track of. I maintained the COVID updates for primary care, where I would just receive all those emails, take what I thought was relevant with a small committee, update a page, and just watch the changes. That let me and other people merely collect this information and then make sure that it was applied there. So instead of everyone having to maintain their own knowledge of like, what's the latest thing? Did I miss an email? I could just come to this web page, click a link to say, show me what's changed since I was here last, and I'd see a quick highlighted view. I so wish UpToDate had this. So let's talk just briefly before we get to the discussion about wiki and hypertext, right? Is there research about this? There's been research in hypertext learning since the 90s, right? But there are some specific research out there, and here are a few of the references about use cases specifically in medicine. So in addition to Brad's article, there are a number of other articles that show that it has some potential benefits in undergraduate medical education, as well as for residents. They're used in a variety of ways, not just as reference tools and on-call reference tools, where they've been demonstrated to have some potential value, but they can also be used as ways of engaging learners and helping them to improve learning by developing their own sort of hypertext knowledge bases in these wikis and then collaboratively editing them. And then there's some data that shows that it also helps people seem to demonstrate more sense of control in their work and being able to get to educational conferences on time. One of the most useful articles for us, though, I think, is this Rasmussen one from 2013, talking about the application of wiki technology to medical education. And there are some potential advantages they talked about that I want us to know about so we can discuss it, and then disadvantages. One of the main advantages that they discussed was this construction of knowledge. And this really supports the constructivist view to learning. So not only am I learning about this, but then I can go and create sort of this hierarchical and interconnected way of doing it. It supports collaborative learning. We can see what each other are doing. We can contribute and make changes to it. It really supports social-based learning. So we can divide different areas that we would each pursue. It's like, I want to know this one, and then I can just quickly learn what you've done by reading the article and then contribute my learning to it. There's a strong level of engagement and ownership that changes when people are being able to participate in this. As I said, I think this is a big factor at the Brigham in how we think about supporting professionalism. There's a built-in mechanism for peer feedback, and there are significant administrative benefits. So we talked about a central source for logistical information, reduced emails, which we've seen ourselves inside our organization, and then some benefits to asynchronous collaboration. Although if I was working on a paper with a bunch of people, I'd probably still just use Google Docs rather than Wikipedia. But if I was going to build a hypertext knowledge system that I wanted lots of people to access, I'd definitely use the Wikipedia instead. What are the barriers? So setup and preparation, which we've hopefully overcome for a number of departments. And then I'll talk later about some resources we can give to those who are not within our institution. Acceptability and engagement. There's research around wikis in particular about challenges related to access and motivation, online socialization, information exchange, knowledge construction, and learning and development that we can do. There's places we can improve here. And then there are challenges related to collaboration, this need for oversight and issues related to hierarchy. And the research, they explored this in 3 particular phases. So one was this exploration or crisis of authority. I don't want to edit. I'm not really the expert, right? Particularly tough at places like our institution where there's so many knowledgeable people. So helping people overcome that and say, you have something to contribute, especially in these specific and unique environments. Then there's an adaptation or crisis of relationship that develops. I'm the attending, a resident just went and edited out something that I wrote and thought was good, right? How do we do that? And then it leads to resolution where all of a sudden it really helps to support this idea that everybody's contribution matters. You have the ability to come together and discuss it, and you move forward to create the best resource for the teams that will come after you. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that the open source part of it matters, right? And why does it matter? It's because I, as a resident, was in the global health and social equity residency, and I was being sent to Rwanda and Haiti. And I knew that if I showed up there and I had access to a resource like that, I would be a much more effective doctor. Right. And so I wanted this to be something that would be available to others, not the content per se, but the how to set it up, and then what some templates were that could get people quickly started. And so before we began it, I discussed it with the hospital and said I was going to be an open source project. And so that's available online. And we've got sort of this wiki about how you could set this up yourself, whether hosted or on a cloud premises. So I'm going to stop it there and then just stop my screen so I can see everyone, so we can have a bit of a discussion. If you don't have questions for me, I do have questions for you, so I will call on 1 or 2 of you. Let me just stop here.
Yeah, that was great. And wow, what a run of effort to get to the point we're at that you've put in. So thank you. And I loved how you set it up with the educational background for why it was chosen and purposely built. Based really on not just the availability, but the theory. So I just want to call that out. That's great. I think it's probably news that, everyone can contribute. I think a lot of people use it as a resource thinking it's like up to date. We don't contribute to that. But so I just share that as kind of a thought and a comment. I welcome questions or thoughts from anyone else in the audience. Or ideas to make it better.
I think, Eric, if I may, one of my key features is always we have our educational pedagogy expert here, and Dr. Ramani has promised to always give me some input on educational pedagogy as we think about it. So I'm going to call specifically on her in a minute or two. I think that while other people are thinking of their questions, my question for you is, how does it feel to you to edit, to be able to edit the resource within your institution about how you get things done? And people like you in your role get things done. I'd love to explore sort of that aspect of it. But Shubha, I was hoping you would have a good response, a reflection, or a challenging pedagogical question.
No, you did bring up the concept of, constructivist paradigm, and said knowledge is constructed by people. But initially, that was my question. Like, editing is one thing, but what if you edit using erroneous information? And you pointed out that, there's some editorial oversight. So is it, and my question was, who's providing the oversight? I mean, clearly you can't do everything. Is it different sections getting oversight from different experts?
Yeah, thanks, Shubha. Wonderful question. So just reflecting briefly, imagine you're in a rotation and a resident has gone, like you, and you're sort of watching these pages, and a resident's gone and added something with erroneous information. What a gift that is to you as a teacher, right? Because these are often, not explicitly voiced, but now in an area that they think other residents should know, they've gone and shared them. Like, hey, this is not, that would be such a valuable teaching tool, I think. So exciting on that one. I think that how does the editorial process work? It's very clear that like the only way that launching within departments has been successful is when there's a clearly identified and committed champion for it. And that's often not the initial person who takes it on, right? But that there's this role, for example, in the Gen Center, the medical director was the key driver for it. But then they quickly assigned somebody to learn how to do the wiki updating. So they would just receive the email, they'd send it to them and say, make a wiki page and send me the link, and they get it back. And now they're the key curators for that area. In certain residencies, the chief resident structure supports this very well. And it naturally and organically starts that way, where the chief residents sort of help to define each of the pages. As they edit every single page is now watched by them. And that's how it just organically develops in that specific way. The only technique that they need in order to do it is if a resident develops an independent page, then the chief residents would need to know to go in and sort of watch those pages so that they can provide some editorial oversight and so on. But everybody, you get notifications about that because the residents will always want to post it, put it into the home page for the organizations that residents can find it. And then there's this other page. So it's got a built-in beautiful organic system, just the way that the Wikipedia system works.
Just so everyone on the call can, take home the engagement process again. How do they access Brigapedia?
Great. So you just go to brigapedia.org and it'll direct you to the link. And then on that first page, it'll ask you to log in. There'll be a login button. So if you log in there, you can, as I said, you're going to use your 5-character one. So like I'm NC874. And then you use your partner's login, and it'll use the same authentication system for that. And then you should have access to it. The other way to do it, of course, is through Sparkle. And so Sparkle, there's a card specifically within that. If you just search for Brigapedia, it'll come up. That has links for each of the specific departments. So there's one for medicine residents, for surgery, and others. You do need to still log in. Yeah.
To tempt everyone with part 2 in a few weeks, so can you just give 30 seconds on what Sparkle is and how it expands on Brigapedia, if you will?
Sure. Thanks, Eric. So we had done one of the quick bursts around why we built it. So Sparkle was the culmination of a realization that we had the tremendous amount of resources that the institution was investing a huge amount in, and that departments themselves were going off and investing in powerful ones that were sometimes hard to connect. We ended up doing a project to list and categorize and define access to all of these using this very flexible data system. And then that was in this Airtable system. And then we built, we wanted there to be this very personalized experience of it. So we built a native app version where people tell us who they are, where they're at, and what they're interested in. And then we access this giant flexible database to help people understand what's available and how they easily access it without them having to know 50 different websites and 22 different ways, 22 different calendars. And it's all integrated into this very simple app called Sparkle. We've got some new features that are launching in it, and I'm looking forward to the educators sharing some of their insights around it, especially around this very lightweight, personalized professional development journey What conferences are your residents going to? How do they catch up on ones they didn't get to see? Those are new things that are launching.
And I believe we're going to talk about that at your part 2, right?
Exactly.
Maybe we'll leave it at that, which is everyone's here been introduced to a very unique way that our community builds really its knowledge and its platform together. That also makes accessibility and use in the moment easier. And then the next time we're going to talk about how we also bring in other resources. That includes commercial property like UpToDate and whatnot through the Sparkle app. So you can access Brigopedia through the Sparkle app. You can also access other options. And so hopefully these things have not only accomplished with Narath's help the build of the knowledge and process, but also the ease of use, which I think can be such a big deal to get over the hump. We have 1 more minute or so. I want to end on time. Last thoughts, last questions from anyone to Narath. Otherwise, I'm going to give him the floor here. Narath, last thoughts from you.
No, I just, it was wonderful to have this opportunity to share this with it. I'm really grateful. Like the Educational Institute has taken over sort of supporting this because it's such a cross-institution effort. And we are learning a lot that we're constantly working with other departments to help say, how can we make this better? I'm delighted and would love to work with people to say, let's make the development of curated knowledge, shared collective knowledge, part of our professional development journey, and getting credit for professionalism would be a wonderful addition to the practice of medicine here at the Brigham.
Thank you so much to everyone joining us, and a big thanks, Narath, for not only building Brigopedia, but for sharing it with us here today. So more to come, and we'll see you back in a few weeks, everyone, for part 2.
Great.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.